Hello everyone, this is Zooc again. This time I'm going to talk about perspective. The reason for this is I got a lot of questions from people asking what should they begin with if they want to get into drawing. And the typical answer you would get from an art teacher would be to study perspective and draw straight lines and draw stick figures and draw this and that. Well, that shit is boring, I'm sorry to say. The way I started drawing was with caricatures, and that basically means funny looking men shooting, throwing poo at each other, axes in their heads, three eyes, five hands, just draw stuff that you would find amusing. Hell, you can draw piles of dog shit, you can draw, just stuff that's around you. Don't stick to just one topic, and because if you draw the same thing over and over and over, eventually you'll get bored and you'll stop doing it. So anyway, again, perspective in relation to what I was saying is what I started getting into after a while of drawing and realizing that my little men didn't quite look right. After I had some of the basics down, I started looking into the more technical side of drawing, because that's how you work. You do something for fun and then you want to be better at it, and I wanted to be better at it. Anyway, I'm going to start off with 1 point perspective. This is the most simple type of perspective, I would say. It's mostly used in landscape painting and drawing. A lot of drawing manuals will have this, will start off with this type of perspective as well. Basically, you have your horizon line and your vanishing point, which are the two things that constitute the 1 point perspective. And all the lines converge to 1 point, as you can see there. One characteristic of the 1 point perspective is that your horizontal lines are parallel to your horizon line. And this is not how we see things. Like, humans see things in 3 point perspective. But 1 point is the most basic form, and I guess you should start with that and just draw. If you feel like drawing a busy street or pastoral landscape sort of thing, then sure, 1 point perspective is good for that. But if you want to draw creatures and more complex things, then you should start off with at least 2 point perspective, and I'll get into that a bit later. As you can see there, I drew some boxes in 1 point perspective. The third small one that I'm drawing now is sort of floating above the second one. It's not really logical, but it doesn't matter. It's just for the sake of presentation. Now, a lot of people are gonna say that it's better to use your hand and not a ruler to draw perspective, and that's very true, because you get used to drawing straight lines. But I decided to use a ruler in this video for the sake of presentation, because I wanted it to look sort of nice and not crooked and all over the place, because I sure as hell can't draw straight lines. Very few people can, maybe after like 10 years of practice. And that's true, I'm not even exaggerating. People can draw straight lines after like 10 years of doing it. It's funny how that works. I'm just thickening the contours of the boxes with a felt tip pen so you can see better what they look like in perspective. Now, the deal with perspective is that the human eye is naturally trained to spot things that are not in perspective. Like, if you make a drawing and it looks like crap and you show it to someone that has no idea about art, they're still gonna say, I don't like it. They're not gonna be able to explain why, they're not gonna know the terms, but they're just gonna say, I don't like it. And that's because perspective is wrong, and that's part of the natural human ability to distinguish between right and wrong perspective. Now, we're getting to the 2 point perspective. This is more commonly used in environmental design and set design for movies and such. And 2 point perspective basically means that you have two vanishing points. So if you have a square object, this time the horizontals are not parallel. One horizontal converges to one vanishing point and the other one converges to another one. And if you were looking at a building from if you're basically floating in the air and looking at a building, then you would see it in 2 point perspective. Humans would probably see it in 3 point perspective, but it's just an example. Now I'm drawing the perspective lines there intersecting, and in a minute I'm gonna massively screw up and draw the wrong thing, because stuff like that happens. I think it was in this one, might have been in the 3.1 where I messed up. Guess we'll see. Now this perspective is forced in this drawing because under normal circumstances your two vanishing points would not be on the same page. They would be much further away to the left and right. But again, for the sake of presentation, I just put them on the same page. In time, after practicing this sort of thing, you'll eventually get used to it and you'll kind of guess where the lines are converging to. Okay, I didn't mess up in this one. I was in the 3.1. But if you're just starting out, and I consider myself a beginner when it comes to perspective because I haven't drawn any landscape or any sort of building type of composition yet at all, ever. I've only drawn creatures because it was what I found fascinating. So I need just about as much practice as an absolute beginner when it comes to perspective. Now, there's another thing to remember. When you're drawing in perspective, your horizon line can be above or below your subject matter. And there's a name for that. When it's above, when the horizon line is above, it's called a bird's eye view. And you've seen that in a lot of Spider-Man movies and generally movies. They show a lot of bird's eye view of buildings and cities. It just adds to the spectacular aspect of the image. Actually, I think it was this one where I messed up. I think I drew the wrong lines there. We'll see in a second. So yeah, the bird's eye view is in 2-point. It's not as often used as it is in 3-point. And 3-point perspective, I'll get that out in a second, is where your verticals converge to a vanishing point as well. So far in the 1-point and the 2-point, the verticals have always been parallel. They're always straight. They go straight down. But in 3-point perspective, they converge to either a point below or above you, or the camera, better called. I'm just drawing some sort of building type shapes just to give an example of how things would look in 3-point perspective. This is the most basic type of composition. Of course, you can go crazy with cars and buildings and people and everything, but that's more advanced. I haven't had much experience with that either. Now, this would be a worm's eye view. It's where the horizon line is under, well, above the camera, actually. But this perspective is very forced. Again, the two vanishing points would never be on the same page in an image like this, because there is no building out there that has such sharp angles. So in a situation like this, the vanishing point, the left one, would be like 2 pages away. I'm just drawing a little person there just to show the scale, because it's important when you do such types of drawings to give a sense of scale, because you never know, you know, that might be a Lego cube, or it might be a matchbox, not a building. So one thing that I've learned from the things I've watched is always have some sort of reference for scale. If you're gonna get into landscape drawing, then it's good to have trees, people, animals, cars, just something to show the viewer that the size is, you know, what you intend it to be. And now we're getting to the 3-point perspective. This is how humans see things. We see everything in 3-point perspective. Of course, if you want to get into details, there are 4-point perspectives and 5-point perspectives, but nobody uses those. Something in a 5-point perspective would be basically something like a fisheye lens, where, you know, you've seen that effect used. As you can see here, I'm drawing a building again, and this time its verticals are converging to a point that's far above the camera. And again, this is the most natural way of things. This is what a building would look like if you were sitting in front of it and looking up. I'm just drawing a tiny person there just to show scale again. That person is in the foreground, and the second person is much smaller, just to show the viewer that, you know, the person in the foreground is closer to them and the one in the background is further away. And that's about it for the perspective, really. There's not much else to say. It's all about practice and coming up with your own stuff. Now, I decided to add a trick here, which might be very useful for some of you. It's basically how to draw a railroad, and a lot of people don't know this, but in perspective, the rectangles have something that's called a foreshortened center. I mentioned foreshortening in my Dark Templar video, and you know, when you look at a square in perspective, its center isn't going to be where you think it is. To get the center of an object in perspective, you have to draw diagonals from each corner, and you get your foreshortened center. Now, from the vanishing point through the center, you draw another line, and then you connect one of the corners through the intersection that the line in the center made, and then you get the same sized object but in perspective. And you can just keep doing that over and over and over again to get basically equal rectangles but seen in perspective, and they're going to get thinner and thinner and thinner. And that's useful because if you ever decide to draw a road or a railroad and you have like these big rocks or big planks in the foreground, you're not really going to know how to draw them in perspective. They're going to look unnatural, and your entire drawing is going to be ruined just because you didn't know how to measure equal distances. Now, to get the planks that make up the railroad, you just draw, well, you can see what I'm doing there. Just draw lines through the middle of the support beam, so to say, and then you draw horizontals going through the centers of the rectangles that I drew. Sorry. And then you get equal sized planks in perspective, and that's basically how those all of those you know, river, railroad drawings that you've probably seen many times, that's how they're made, and that's how those people get equally sized planks, beams, etc. in perspective. I think I messed up there. I actually didn't draw the line where I was supposed to, but it's like very late at night, and I just wanted to make a quick video and explain how this goes. There's a lot more to say about perspective. There's probably, I've read like 2 books about it and still haven't retained much information. But for starters, it's good to have a sense of how things look and why they look. If you do decide to study perspective, eventually you're going to start seeing it in on the street and around you. You know, I often, when I'm out, I look for like how buildings and trees look like in perspective and try to figure out where the vanishing point is and where the horizon line might be in the city. And it's very hard to spot because it's blocked by everything. When you're on an open field, it's not so hard, but in a city, it's tricky, and that's why set designers and concept designers that do environments are something that are people that I greatly respect, because mastering perspective and to such a degree of complexity is quite a feat. In any case, I hope you learned something from this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.